The office was too quiet for a morning that should have meant everything to me. I remember staring at the polished surface of Clara Simmons's desk, the way it reflected the light from the massive glass window behind her, and thinking how sterile it all looked. Cold, perfect, expensive, and indifferent. My promotion application sat neatly in the center of her desk. 20 pages. 5 years condensed into tidy bullet points, graphs, and summaries. I had obsessed over every line, every metric, every word. It wasn't just an application. It was proof of every birthday I had missed, every weekend I had spent in the office instead of at the park with Sophie, every time I had told myself that hard work always pays off. Clara flipped through it with casual fingers, eyes barely touching the lines, lips pursed in polite concentration. The longer she skimmed, the more I felt my chest tighten. Not because I feared rejection, but because I recognized that look, the look of someone who had already decided, who was only going through the motions to appear fair. "Julia," she began, voice smooth like glass, "I appreciate your ambition. Truly. But after reviewing your application, I don't believe you are ready for senior management." The words hung in the air. For a moment, the entire office around me seemed to dissolve into silence. All I could hear was my own pulse. My hands stayed folded neatly in my lap, my smile stayed polite, but inside me something shifted. I tried to push back carefully. I maintained the highest client satisfaction ratings in the department. I rebuilt the Valentino Global account when it was nearly lost. I have not taken a real weekend off in 3 years. Clara adjusted her glasses. "Adequate," she said. "That is the word I would use to describe your work. Adequate does not qualify someone for senior management. Perhaps in another year, or 2. Adequate. That single word hollowed me out more than an outright insult would have. Adequate was the word you used when a meal filled your stomach but didn't taste good. Adequate was the grade you got in school when you barely passed but learned nothing. Adequate meant I had been killing myself for half a decade and still landed in the gray zone between invisible and replaceable. I nodded, the smile never leaving my face. "Thank you for your feedback. I understand." Of course I understood. I always understood. I understood when Clara presented my strategies in executive meetings and accepted applause as though she had written them. I understood when her name appeared in client reports that I had drafted at 2 in the morning. I understood when she was promoted and I was told to wait my turn. Clara looked at her watch as though our conversation had already ended. "There is something more urgent. The Valentino proposal needs additional metrics before they sign. I will need you to handle that today." "Of course," I repeated softly. I gathered my folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked out. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor as I passed by the corner office that might have been mine. A wide glass wall, a sweeping view of the city, a door that could have displayed my name. But it didn't. It belonged to someone else, someone with a louder voice, sharper elbows, and the audacity to claim space I had only ever earned silently. I returned to my cubicle, my invisible kingdom. The hum of the office greeted me. Phones rang, keyboards clattered, someone laughed down the hall. I sat at my desk, staring at the neat stack of files waiting for my attention. Normally, I would feel a spark of pride in this order I had created. I had designed workflows so seamless that my department ran like clockwork. But today, all I felt was exhaustion and clarity. That night in the parking garage, I sat in my car with my hands gripping the steering wheel. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked back at me, the fluorescent light casting shadows across my face. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even angry. I was calculating. 2 decisions came to me with the sharpness of truth. 1, I would cancel the vacation I had scheduled for next month. 2, I would stop writing the daily operational guides, the guides no one acknowledged but everyone depended on. They didn't know it yet, but their perfect system was about to face its first real test without me holding it together. Before I tell you what happened next, you should know a little more about me. My name is Julia Wood, and until that morning, I was the most reliable employee at Harrington & Co., a global financial consulting firm. Reliable, not visible. Reliable, not rewarded. Reliable, not promoted. Reliability isn't glamorous. Nobody applauds when the lights turn on. Nobody throws a party because the train arrived on time. They only notice when things fail. And for 5 years, nothing had failed on my watch. But the price of being flawless is invisibility. I had lived in invisibility for too long. When I first joined Harrington & Co., the department was in chaos. I was 30, freshly divorced, and desperate to prove that I could hold my ground in a world that had no patience for hesitation. The man who had led the team before me left abruptly after a fight with upper management. He walked out with every password, every process map, every shred of institutional knowledge. There were no transition notes, no documentation. Just a pile of angry clients threatening to walk, and a group of employees too overwhelmed to even know where to start. I could have run too. I almost did. My first week, I stayed until midnight every night, poring over spreadsheets that made no sense, contracts half completed, invoices mismatched with payments. On Friday, I cried in the bathroom stall because the mountain seemed too steep. But I didn't quit. Instead, I built the mountain into something climbable. I reverse-engineered workflows like a detective reconstructing a crime scene. I called clients personally, apologizing, promising that things would be different. I color-coded files until the chaos began to resemble order. I learned how to think 5 steps ahead because if one step crumbled, everything would collapse. 3 months later, the same clients who had threatened to leave were praising our department for its renewed efficiency. Clara congratulated herself in the executive meeting for stabilizing the ship. I sat in the back row, hands folded, invisible. That was the first time I understood how my story here would play out. I wasn't the star on the stage. I was the technician in the wings, making sure the lights didn't flicker and the microphone worked. If I did everything perfectly, no one would clap. If I slipped once, the entire show would collapse. For years, I convinced myself that being the invisible backbone was noble. My siblings used to call me the problem solver when I was growing up. With 4 younger brothers, I had to be. I learned to fix things before they exploded, to stay calm when others panicked. At Harrington, those same instincts became my job description. But problem solvers rarely get promoted. Problem solvers are too useful where they are. I began to understand that truth one late night when I found myself in the office kitchen at 1 a.m., microwaving cold coffee because I was too tired to brew a fresh pot. Sophie was 9 then. She had left me a voicemail earlier that evening. "Mom, can you come to my recital tomorrow, please?" I had whispered yes to the empty office, knowing it was a lie. The next day, I watched the shaky video my sister had recorded. Sophie on stage, clutching her violin, eyes scanning the audience for a face that wasn't there. My throat burned when I realized I had traded that moment for an Excel sheet and an ungrateful email from Clara that simply read, "Good, send it." That was the real cost of being adequate. Sacrifices so quiet that no one even noticed I was giving them. By the time Sophie turned 11, she had stopped asking if I could come. She would simply say, "You're probably busy, Mom, so don't worry." I hated how practiced she sounded, as though disappointment had become routine. It's funny how you can live in a routine of invisibility for so long that it begins to feel permanent. Like background noise, you forget you are hearing until the silence reminds you. That morning in Clara's office was my silence. Adequate. The word burned in my chest as I sat in the parking garage later, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My dark hair pulled into a practical bun, the faint lines of exhaustion around my eyes, the lipstick I applied hours ago faded. Was this the woman I had become? Adequate at work, absent at home, forgotten everywhere else. No, the woman staring back at me wasn't broken. She wasn't even angry. She was calculating. I pressed the ignition button, the engine humming alive, and felt something inside me shift. I would stop holding up the weight of everyone else's incompetence. I would let the cracks show. And if Harrington and Co. thought I was adequate, then they were about to discover how inadequate they were without me. I didn't realize it yet, but that decision would ripple far beyond a single department. It would test friendships, loyalty, and even the limits of my own patience. It would change how Sophie looked at me. It would change how Clara looked at me. And eventually, it would change how I looked at myself. Because once you stop being invisible, you can never go back to the shadows. And I was about to step into the light, whether they liked it or not. The next morning, I walked into the office at exactly 9 o'clock. Not a minute early, not a minute late. Just 9. It sounds like nothing, doesn't it? A tiny adjustment in schedule. But for me, it was everything. For 5 years, my mornings had belonged to the company long before the official workday began. I used to arrive by 7:30, sometimes earlier, giving myself those quiet hours to repair yesterday's damage and prepare everyone else's day. No one ever asked me to do it, but everyone relied on it. Now I walked in with empty hands. No briefing notes, no updated dashboards, no emergency plans already tucked neatly into folders. I simply carried my laptop bag the way everyone else did and sat down at my desk. I opened my inbox. A storm of emails waited, as usual. But this time, I ignored the ones where I was copied but not addressed directly. If an email wasn't meant for me, it wasn't mine. It was amazing how freeing that felt. At 9:15, Peter from accounts appeared at my desk, his hair sticking up as though he had run his hands through it one too many times. "Julia, did you see the chain about the scheduling conflict with Valentino Global?" "Yes," I said calmly, my fingers still moving across the keyboard. He waited. "And?" I glanced up. "And I forwarded it to procurement. It's their scope. Diane will handle it." His eyebrows rose. "But you always," I cut him off gently, "not this time." For a moment, he looked like someone who had lost his footing on a staircase, teetering between disbelief and annoyance. Then he muttered something under his breath and left. By 10:00, 2 more colleagues had approached me with similar expectations. "Julia, can you run the client report? Julia, can you double-check this compliance table? Julia, can you know? Not anymore." I answered politely, always with a smile, but redirected the work where it actually belonged. Procurement, compliance, accounts, departments with their own managers and their own staff, departments that had been leaning on me like crutches for too long. By noon, the office was buzzing with a strange new energy. People whispering, eyebrows raised, messages flying across chats. Julia isn't fixing it. Julia isn't stepping in. Julia isn't doing it. And I was. At 5 o'clock sharp, I packed my bag. My phone buzzed with unread messages. Clara's office light still glowed, her silhouette hunched over her screen. For a split second, habit tugged at me. Stay, help, finish what others couldn't, but I walked out. The sound of the door clicking shut behind me felt like a small revolution. In the car, I opened my phone and canceled the vacation I had scheduled. The first in 3 years, a lonely cabin I had booked in some half-hearted attempt to rest. I realized I didn't want to escape anymore. I wanted to watch this building burn down in real time, not from miles away. That evening, when I stepped into the apartment, Sophie's voice floated from the kitchen. "Mom, you're home already?" She peeked out from behind the counter, her cheeks powdered with flour. She was holding a spoon, a clump of dough precariously balanced at the end. "What's this?" I asked, dropping my bag. "Cookies," she announced proudly. "But they don't look right." I walked closer. The shapes were uneven, some flat and some thick. They looked nothing like the pictures on the recipe card stuck to the fridge, but they smelled heavenly. "That's the secret of cookies, Sophie," I said. "They never look right, but they always taste good." She grinned. And then, suspiciously, "Why are you home early?" I hesitated. "Because my time is valuable, and I wanted to spend more of it with you." Her face lit up. "Can we do this tomorrow, too?" "Yes, every tomorrow I can." She threw her arms around my waist, flour and all. And in that moment, I felt lighter than I had in years. But my phone buzzed on the counter. Again, again, again. Each vibration was another reminder of the world I had just chosen to ignore. For the first time, I let it buzz until the sound became background noise, until Sophie's laughter drowned it out. That night, as we sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor eating misshapen cookies, I thought about what Clara had called me. Adequate. If this was adequacy, cookies with my daughter, laughter in our kitchen, no emails on my lap at midnight, then perhaps adequacy was worth more than the illusion of excellence. But deep down, I knew the office wouldn't stay quiet. Systems built on invisible work collapse loudly. And tomorrow, the cracks would start to show. The second day of my quiet rebellion began the same way as the first. I walked through the glass doors at 9 sharp, smiled at the receptionist, and rode the elevator up as though I hadn't spent 5 years sprinting to arrive before anyone else. I sat down at my desk, opened my inbox, and sorted emails. Direct ones I handled. The rest I ignored. It didn't take long for the storm to arrive. At 9:30, a supplier issue escalated. One of our partners had failed to deliver updated compliance reports, and the system flagged their status as non-compliant. Normally, this would have been my problem to fix. I would have pulled records, patched holes, and written a temporary process to keep everything moving while drafting a long-term solution. Instead, I forwarded the message to the compliance team. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Diane, the compliance manager. "Julia, can you just handle this one? You're faster at sorting through their files." I took a slow breath. "I'm sure you'll manage, Diane. This falls under your department." Silence. Then, a sharp exhale. Fine. When I hung up, I smiled to myself. It was beginning. By mid-morning, the office energy had shifted. Conversations were sharper, voices raised, chairs scraping across the floor. Without my invisible hand stitching everything together, the seams of our workflow began to fray. Around 11, Clara appeared at my desk. She never came down to my cubicle unless she needed something. Today, she looked polished as always, her silk blouse flawless, her makeup immaculate, but there was a tightness around her mouth. "Julia, where are the updated notes for my meeting with Valentino this morning?" I looked up from my screen, feigning mild surprise. I didn't prepare them. Her eyes narrowed. "Why not?" "Because that isn't part of my job description." She blinked as if she hadn't heard me correctly. "Excuse me?" I repeated slowly, clearly. "Preparing management briefing notes isn't listed in my responsibilities." Her jaw tightened. "Julia, you've always done it." "And perhaps that's the problem," I replied. For a moment her polished mask cracked, just slightly. Then she collected herself, lips curving into a cool smile. "Very well, I will manage." She turned sharply, her heels clicking against the floor like gunshots. After she left, Peter leaned over the wall of his cubicle, eyes wide. "What was that about?" "Nothing," I said lightly, returning to my screen. But it wasn't nothing. It was the sound of an empire losing its scaffolding. At 5 o'clock, I stood and packed my bag again. My coworkers exchanged glances, whispers passing between them. "Leaving already?" One of them muttered. I didn't answer. I didn't owe them answers. I stepped out into the evening, the cool air washing over me like freedom. That night, I cooked dinner with Sophie. Real dinner. Not takeout eaten from cartons, not leftovers reheated in the microwave. Pasta, salad, garlic bread. She sat at the counter, grating cheese while I stirred the sauce. "This is weird," she said suddenly. "What is?" I asked, tasting the sauce. "You being here on a weekday?" Before bedtime, her words pierced me. I forced a smile. "Weird in a good way, I hope?" She nodded. "Definitely good." We ate together, laughing over garlic bread that came out too crispy, arguing over whether pineapple belonged on pizza, and planning a Saturday trip to the park. For the first time in years, I felt like a mother instead of a ghost passing through her childhood. Later that night, I checked my work phone once. 17 missed calls, 4 voicemails, a flood of emails, some marked urgent, others marked critical. The supplier issue hadn't been resolved. Clara's meeting had gone poorly. The compliance deadline loomed. I set the phone back down without responding. The next morning, I walked in again at 9. By then, the cracks had deepened. Projects were delayed. Clients were restless. Clara's patience was thinning, and whispers around the office had grown louder. "Everything is falling apart," Peter whispered as I passed his desk. I only smiled, because I knew this was only the beginning. By the third morning, the tension in the office was so thick it felt like walking into a storm cloud. Conversations hushed when I passed. Desks that used to hum with casual chatter now buzzed with frantic typing, whispered calls, and impatient sighs. I arrived, as I had promised myself, at exactly 9. I set down my bag, opened my laptop, and methodically checked only the emails addressed directly to me. The rest piled up like unread newspapers. Within 15 minutes, the first wave hit. The compliance team had missed their filing deadline. A minor supplier failed to deliver updated documentation, triggering a cascade of alerts in our internal systems. Clients were calling, confused by delays. Normally, I would have had a patch ready before anyone noticed. Now the alarms kept ringing. At 9:30, Diane from compliance stormed into the department. "Julia, this is ridiculous. You know our system, just fix it." I looked up calmly. "It's not my department." Her eyes blazed. "Don't play games with me. If this fails, it's on all of us." I smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time everyone else starts learning the systems too." She muttered something sharp under her breath and stalked off. By 10:00, my phone buzzed. "Clara," I let it ring. 5 minutes later, she appeared at my desk in person. "Julia, I need the Valentino projections." "Where are they?" I tilted my head slightly. "Projections are prepared by accounts." Her nostrils flared. "Don't be difficult. Just send me the updated file." I leaned back. "I don't have it." For the first time in years, Clara looked, rattled, her polished facade cracked. She pressed her lips together, spun on her heel, and walked off without another word. Around me, whispers rose again. "Julia's changed. Julia's refusing. Julia's letting it all fall apart." They weren't wrong. By noon, the cracks had widened into canyons. A major client complained about delays in their custom implementation. Peter from accounts rushed past me, sweat glistening on his forehead. Diane barked orders at her overwhelmed team. Clara's voice carried down the hallway as she snapped into her phone, her tone sharp and defensive. I sat quietly, answering only what belonged to me. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't extinguishing fires. I was watching them burn, and strangely, it felt like freedom. That evening, I walked out again at 5 sharp. My coworkers looked at me as though I were walking away from a building on fire. Maybe I was. At home, Sophie was sprawled on the couch with her homework. She looked up, surprised again. "You're home?" I dropped my bag, kicked off my heels, and flopped down beside her. "I am." She grinned. Want to help me with math? I groaned dramatically. Math, no way. She shoved her notebook into my lap. You're good at numbers. You always fix everything. The words hit me like a whisper of my old life. Always fix everything. Not anymore, I thought. Out loud, I said, tonight I only fix cookies. And I dragged her into the kitchen where we baked another messy batch, laughing when flour exploded across the counter. My work phone buzzed the entire evening. I didn't look at it once. The next morning, when I arrived again at 9, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to desperate. People darted between desks, clutching papers, voices raised. Clara's office door slammed twice before 10. Peter appeared at my desk, panic in his eyes. Julia, Valentino Global is furious. They've requested urgent changes to their plan and nobody knows how to implement them. I nodded, calm as ever. That's documented. He ran a hand through his hair. Nobody understands your documentation. Then maybe they should start learning, I replied. He stared at me, open-mouthed, before rushing off again. By mid-morning, Clara herself marched into the open office. Her heels clicked like hammers on glass. She was pale beneath her flawless makeup, her composure fraying. Where are the process notes for Valentino's customizations? She demanded. On the shared drive, I said pleasantly, under client implementations. There are hundreds of files there. Which one? I tapped my keyboard. The master document is titled Valentino Global Integration Complete Process Documentation. 200 pages organized by module. Clara stared at me, horror flickering across her face. Can't you just handle this directly? I smiled sweetly. I would love to. But I have the quarterly compliance review this afternoon. Her hands tightened into fists. This can't wait until tomorrow. I tilted my head. Then perhaps you'd like me to reschedule the compliance review, though regulators might not appreciate the delay. For a moment, fury blazed in her eyes. Then she spun and stormed away, heels slamming against the floor. I watched her go, calm and steady, even as adrenaline thrummed in my chest. The storm was building. And deep down, I knew the first lightning strike was coming. By noon, the department felt like a sinking ship. Phones rang endlessly, people darted in and out of conference rooms, and Clara's sharp voice echoed down the hallway every few minutes, a brittle edge barely hiding her panic. I sat quietly at my desk, working through the tasks that belonged only to me. The contrast was almost absurd, chaos all around me, calm at the center. At 12:30, Clara's assistant appeared, breathless. Julia, emergency meeting. Conference room. Now, I stood slowly, taking my notebook and pen as though I were walking into any ordinary meeting. But when I entered the room, I knew this was different. Around the table sat Clara, pale and tense, Peter with sweat dampening his collar, Diane from compliance looking as if she hadn't slept, and Marcus Grant, the regional director himself. His presence meant one thing: this wasn't just a departmental fire. It was a blaze threatening the company's reputation. Marcus nodded curtly as I sat. Thank you for joining us, Julia. We're facing a situation with Valentino Global. They're unhappy with the implementation delays and the lack of clear adjustments to their requirements. They've threatened to pull their contract. A chill rippled across the room. Valentino Global wasn't just any client. They were worth millions annually, and losing them could trigger a cascade of other exits. Clara cleared her throat, attempting her usual confident tone. We're handling it. I've spoken to their director personally. Marcus's eyes sharpened. Then why did I just receive an email from him, copying the CEO, requesting Julia Wood by name on the next call? The room went silent. Every eye turned to me. My pen stilled against the page. Valentino requested me? Marcus nodded. They said, and I quote, "We want Julia on this call. She understands our business better than anyone else at Harrington." Plot twist. The words landed like a lightning strike, shocking the air from the room. Clara's face drained of color. That's not, she began, then stopped, visibly recalculating her expression. She forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Of course, Julia has been involved in some of the details. But as senior management, Marcus raised a hand, cutting her off. Valentino doesn't want senior management. They want results. And they want Julia. I sat still, every nerve in my body thrumming. For years, I had been invisible. And now, suddenly, a client worth millions had pulled me into the spotlight by name. Clara turned to me, her eyes blazing with barely concealed fury. Julia, you'll join the call at 1. Prepare the documentation. I tilted my head slightly. The documentation is already prepared. 200 pages organized by module. Her teeth clenched. Then review it. Quickly. I smiled politely, closing my notebook. Certainly. The meeting dissolved into frantic chatter, Marcus outlining stakes, Peter muttering numbers, Diane scribbling notes. Clara sat stiffly, avoiding my gaze. When I left the room, I felt every pair of eyes on my back. At 1 o'clock sharp, I logged into the video call. The faces of Valentino Global's team appeared on screen, stern and impatient. Their director spoke first. "Thank you, Julia, for joining us." Finally, I blinked. Finally. As if they had been waiting all along. I cleared my throat, professional and steady. "I'm here. Let's walk through your concerns." For the next hour, I guided the call. I laid out a phased approach to their requested changes, addressing the most critical needs first, then layering in long-term adjustments. I listened, asked clarifying questions, and reframed their frustrations into solvable problems. By the end of the meeting, their director leaned back, visibly calmer. "This is exactly why we wanted you on this call. You understand not just our technical requirements but our business. Thank you." The call ended. My inbox pinged almost immediately. A message from Marcus. "Excellent work. Let's talk tomorrow." I closed my laptop slowly. Around me, colleagues pretended not to stare, their eyes darting toward me then away. Even Clara, standing in the doorway of her office, looked at me with something new, not respect, not admiration, something closer to fear. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't invisible, and that terrified Clara more than anything. The day after the Valentino call, I felt at the moment I stepped through the office doors, the air was different. It wasn't the kind of difference you could measure with sound or sight, but it pressed against my skin like humidity before a thunderstorm. Heads turned as I walked past the reception desk. A few smiles flickered, a few nods. People who had never noticed me before suddenly seemed to register my existence. For 5 years, I had moved through these hallways like a ghost, blending into the background. Now the ghost had shape, form, weight. I arrived at my desk at 9 sharp. The old me would have been there 2 hours earlier, already knee-deep in other people's problems. Not anymore. My inbox was a tidal wave. Dozens of subject lines shouted for attention, most of them flagged urgent. But I scanned them carefully and clicked only on the ones addressed directly to me. If someone wanted Julia Wood's help, they would have to type my name in the to field, not hide me on CC. The rest I left unread. I was halfway through answering a client's routine inquiry when the first visitor appeared. It was Peter from accounts, clutching a sheaf of papers like they might dissolve in his sweaty hands. "Julia, could you take a quick look? The numbers aren't lining up with the forecasts and Clara." I held up a hand, calm but firm. "Peter, that's account scope. You'll figure it out." He blinked, stunned. "But you always?" "Not anymore," I said simply, turning back to my screen. He hesitated, then shuffled off, muttering. By mid-morning, Diane from compliance arrived. She dropped into the chair opposite my desk without asking, her lipstick smudged from biting her lip. "The suppliers are late with their certifications again." "The system flagged half of them. I know you usually clean it up." "Then this is your chance to clean it up," I replied gently, though my tone left no room for argument. Her eyes narrowed. "Julia, be serious. We can't afford another mistake this week." I closed my laptop with deliberate care and leaned forward. "Neither can I, and for years, I have been carrying other people's mistakes without acknowledgement. That ends now." She inhaled sharply, pushed back her chair, and stormed away. The whispers started then. I could feel them ripple through the office like a current, spreading from desk to desk. Julia isn't fixing it. Julia's letting things slide. Julia's changed. They weren't wrong. At 11:00, Clara descended from her glass-walled office like a queen forced into the village. Her heels struck the floor with the precision of a drumbeat. She stopped at my cubicle, her shadow falling across my desk. "Where are the updated notes for my meeting with Valentino this morning?" Her tone was sharp, commanding, as though sheer force could return things to the way they used to be. I looked up slowly. "I didn't prepare them." Her lips parted, confusion flashing across her face before fury masked it. "Why not?" "Because preparing management briefings isn't in my job description." "You've always done it," she hissed. "And perhaps that's the problem," I replied evenly. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time in years, I saw Clara unsettled, truly unsettled. She recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders. "Very well, I'll manage." Her voice dripped with contempt as she turned and walked away, but her composure was thinner than glass. That evening, I shut down my computer at exactly 5. Colleagues glanced up, eyes wide, whispers fluttering in my wake. Leaving early, their expressions seemed to say, but it wasn't early. It was on time. For once, I was honoring the contract as it was written, not as it had been silently rewritten on my back. When I stepped into my apartment, Sophie was curled on the couch with her violin. She looked up, surprise flashing across her face. "You're home," she said, as if the word itself was a miracle. "I am," I answered, dropping my bag and sinking onto the couch beside her. She grinned mischievously. Want to hear me squeak through my scales? I laughed, the sound foreign in my own mouth. Always. She raised the bow, producing a sound so sharp it made me wince. We both burst into giggles. Don't quit your day job, Mom, she teased. Her words hit me harder than she realized. My day job had consumed me for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to laugh in my own living room. After dinner, she asked the question I had been dreading. Why are you home so much lately? I hesitated, then chose honesty. Because I decided work doesn't deserve all of me anymore. Her brow furrowed. You mean you quit? Not yet, I said, smiling softly, but I quit being invisible. For a long moment, she just studied me. Then, cautiously, she asked, So you'll come to my recital next week? The air left my lungs. She hadn't asked in years. Disappointment had become her expectation. And yet, here she was, daring to believe again. Yes, I said firmly. This time, I'll be there. Her smile was so bright it ached. Later that night, after she had gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a mug of tea. My work phone buzzed beside me, emails, missed calls, urgent requests piling up like storm clouds. I stared at it, then flipped it face down. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt, only clarity. The next morning, Marcus himself appeared at my desk. He almost never ventured down to our floor unless something was truly dire. Colleagues glanced up from their screens, eyes tracking him as he stopped by my cubicle. Julia, can we talk? He asked, his voice low but steady. I nodded, standing. The office buzz followed us like static as we walked side by side to his corner office. Inside, the city stretched out beneath wide glass windows. His desk gleamed dark wood, lined with awards and framed photographs. He gestured for me to sit. I've been reviewing your work, he began, folding his hands together. Yesterday with Valentino, that was remarkable. You didn't just solve a problem, you rebuilt their trust. That's rare. Thank you, I said simply. But I need to understand something, he continued, leaning forward. Why didn't I know it was you holding this department together all along? I met his gaze without flinching. Because I made it my job to keep things invisible. He studied me, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back. Invisible or not, you've proven yourself indispensable. His voice lowered. And that makes you dangerous. I tilted my head slightly. Dangerous? To Clara, to anyone who underestimated you. His words lingered long after I left his office. For years, I had felt invisible. Now, suddenly, I was dangerous, and I wasn't sure which version of me scared them more. The days that followed the Valentino call stretched long and tense. It was as if the office had been dropped into a pressure cooker. Every conversation seemed sharper, every footstep heavier, every meeting tinged with urgency. Clara, once untouchable in her glass-walled office, no longer looked untouchable. She looked cornered. She came to my desk more often now, her tone alternating between sharp commands and brittle attempts at friendliness. Julia, I'll need you to double-check this client presentation. Or, Julia, we should work together on the implementation timeline. Each time I answered the same way. That isn't in my scope. Or, that's account's responsibility. Always polite, always calm. Every time, the color rose in her cheeks, the mask slipping a little more. It didn't take long for the whispers to change direction. Colleagues who used to rush to Clara now hovered at my desk, asking subtle questions, fishing for guidance. They knew who actually understood the systems. They knew who could save them if they needed saving. Clara saw it too. The way their eyes lingered on me, the way their voices softened when they asked me something. Her jaw tightened whenever she passed my cubicle, and I knew what she was thinking. She was losing them. One afternoon, I overheard two junior analysts whispering by the coffee machine. If Julia leaves, we're screwed. She's basically the department. Their words weren't meant for me, but they reached me anyway, and they were true. That evening, I walked out at 5 sharp once more. My steps were light, my conscience clear. The chaos behind me could stay behind me. When I opened the apartment door, Sophie greeted me with a shout. Mom, you're early again. She ran to me, her hair in a messy braid, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She waved a brochure in my face. Look, the Science Museum has a new exhibit this weekend. Can we go? The old me would have hesitated, excuses already forming, deadlines, meetings, late-night reports. But the new me didn't hesitate at all. Yes, I said, we'll go. Her smile nearly split her face. Saturday came, and for the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to my phone. We spent the afternoon wandering through halls filled with glowing exhibits, Sophie darting from one display to the next, tugging me along by the hand. Look at this, Mom, she exclaimed, pressing her face against a glass case that held a model of the solar system. It's like the planets are dancing. I knelt beside her, watching her eyes shine with wonder. They are dancing, and you know what? You're my brightest star. She rolled her eyes, laughing. Cheesy, Mom. But she squeezed my hand tighter. After the museum, we stopped for ice cream, sitting on a park bench as the sun dipped low. Sophie licked chocolate from her fingers, chattering about school, friends, books she wanted to read. For once, I wasn't half listening with one eye on my phone. I was fully there. That night back home, we cooked dinner together. Pasta again, messy, chaotic, perfect. She grated cheese while I stirred the sauce, flour dusting the counters like snow. This feels like a real family, she said suddenly, her voice soft. My heart tightened. We are a real family, Sophie. I know, she said quickly, looking down. It's just you're here now. Her words were both gift and wound. When she went to bed, I stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at my silent work phone on the counter. Dozens of unread messages blinked across the screen. Reports overdue. Clients unsettled. Clara grasping at control. But for the first time, I didn't feel pulled toward it. I realized then that I was living two parallel lives. One life in the office, where chaos spread like wildfire, Clara scrambled to hold on to authority, and Marcus's eyes lingered on me with curiosity and calculation. A life where my invisibility had vanished, replaced by the weight of recognition. The other life was here, home with Sophie, warm, simple, real. Laughter over burnt garlic bread. Museum tickets stuck to the fridge. Promises kept. Two lives, running side by side, both demanding choices. And deep down, I knew I couldn't live both forever. Soon, I would have to choose. The Monday after our museum weekend began like any other, coffee in hand, Sophie's laughter still echoing in my ears as I walked into the office at 9 sharp. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I knew something had shifted again. The whispers were louder now, less cautious, more pointed. People weren't just talking about me anymore. They were talking to me. Julia, could you weigh in on this? Julia, do you think we should escalate this issue? Julia, I know it's not your responsibility, but you always know what to do. I shut down each request with a polite firmness. Not my scope. That belongs to your team. Check the documentation. At first, they blinked at me like children scolded by a parent. Then they retreated, grumbling. They were learning, slowly, that the safety net they had taken for granted no longer existed. By mid-morning, Clara burst into the open floor, her voice sharp and brittle. Everyone into the conference room. Now. We shuffled inside, the air thick with tension. Clara stood at the head of the table, her manicured hands gripping the edge like a woman clinging to a ledge. We've had complaints from 2 more clients, she announced. Deadlines missed, deliverables delayed. This cannot continue. All eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. Clara noticed. Her gaze snapped to me, icy and direct. Julia, do you have something to add? I met her eyes calmly. Those accounts aren't mine. A ripple of discomfort spread across the table. Clara's nostrils flared. You've supported those accounts before. I documented every process, I replied. If others read the documentation, they'll find what they need. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara's mask cracked just slightly, but enough for everyone to see the fury burning beneath. The meeting ended with no resolution. As we filed out, Peter whispered to me, "She's unraveling." I didn't answer, but the truth was written all over Clara's face. Later that afternoon, Marcus called me into his office again. His tone was calm, but there was an edge of curiosity. "I want you to be honest with me, Julia," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Do you see a way through this chaos?" I folded my hands in my lap. The systems are clear. The documentation is thorough. The problem isn't the work. It's the dependency. For too long, people relied on me instead of learning to manage their own responsibilities. He studied me for a long moment. "You're saying the cracks were always there. You just covered them." "Yes," I said softly, "and now the cover is gone." Something flickered in his eyes, understanding, respect, maybe even admiration, but he only nodded. "Thank you, Julia, that's all for now." As I left, I felt Clara's gaze burning into me from across the floor. That evening, back home, Sophie sprawled across the couch with her violin case open beside her. "Can we go to the park this weekend?" she asked, plucking a string idly. "Of course," I said without hesitation. Her eyes lit up. "You mean it?" "I mean it," I promised. It struck me then how fragile her trust had become. Every yes I gave her now was more than a promise, it was a chance to heal old wounds. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee, an unfamiliar name appeared in my inbox, a recruiter. "Julia, I came across your work through industry contacts. We're seeking someone with your expertise for a senior role at Riverton Solutions. I'd love to schedule a conversation." Riverton, one of our top competitors. I stared at the email, my pulse quickening. For years, I had dreamed of leaving Harrington, but the dream always ended with Sophie's school tuition, rent, bills, the security of a paycheck. Now, suddenly, the door was opening. I didn't respond right away. I closed my laptop, heart thudding, but the message lingered in my mind all day, whispering possibilities. That afternoon, Clara confronted me again. She cornered me by the copier, her smile too sharp, her perfume suffocating. "I hear Riverton has been sniffing around," she said casually, as though we were two friends gossiping over drinks. I froze, masking my shock. "Do they?" Her smile widened, brittle and dangerous. "Word travels fast. If you're thinking of leaving, Julia, just remember. This company has been your home for years." "Home," I repeated softly, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. Clara leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Don't make the mistake of burning bridges." I met her eyes steadily. "Sometimes, Clara, bridges are meant to burn." Her smile faltered. That evening, at home, Sophie and I baked cookies again. She chattered about school while flour dusted her cheeks, and I realized something. Leaving Harrington wouldn't just be about escaping Clara or seizing opportunity. It would be about choosing this, choosing her, choosing us. As she licked chocolate off her fingers and laughed, I thought about Riverton's email, about possibility, about freedom, and I knew sooner or later I would have to choose. The next few days blurred into one long hum of tension. Every time I opened my inbox, Riverton's email sat there like a secret waiting to be told. I hadn't answered yet, but I reread it more times than I wanted to admit. Senior role. Expertise recognized. We'd love to schedule a conversation. It wasn't just a job offer. It was recognition. Proof that my years of invisible labor had value outside these walls. At Harrington, people were finally noticing me because chaos had forced them to. At Riverton, they noticed me because they saw my worth. The difference was sharp, almost painful. Meanwhile, Clara was unraveling. On Wednesday, she called another all-hands meeting. Her voice was brittle, her smile stretched too thin. She talked in circles about accountability, responsibility, teamwork, but every sentence felt like a blade disguised as a compliment. When she asked for updates, she zeroed in on me. "Julia, what progress have you made on the Valentino timeline?" I met her gaze evenly. "The timeline is documented. Accounts is responsible for updates." A flicker of fury crossed her face before she smoothed it over. "Of course. Thank you, Julia." After the meeting, Diane cornered me by the elevator. "She's trying to trap you," she whispered. "I know," I said calmly. "She'll blame you the moment something slips." "She's already tried," I replied, pressing the elevator button, "but people are starting to see the truth." Diane looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Be careful." That evening, Marcus requested another one-on-one. His office was dim, the city glowing behind him like a backdrop for confessions. "I need to ask," he said, leaning forward. "Are you planning to leave Harrington?" The directness of the question startled me, though I kept my expression neutral. "Why do you ask?" "Because Riverton has been calling me too," he admitted. "Not about me, about you. They want references." My pulse quickened. "And what did you tell them?" "That you're the backbone of this department," he said simply. "That losing you would be catastrophic." I inhaled slowly. "That sounds like a warning." "It is," he said, "but not to Riverton, to Clara. To anyone who still doesn't understand what you are to this company." I searched his eyes, trying to read the calculation behind them. Was he protecting me, testing me, preparing to use me? Before I could decide, he added, "Julia, you have options. That makes you powerful. Use that power wisely." His words echoed in my head long after I left his office. At home, Sophie was sprawled on the rug with colored pencils scattered around her. She was sketching the solar system we'd seen at the museum, each planet carefully labeled in her messy handwriting. "Look, Mom," she said, holding up her drawing. "We're Earth." I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Why Earth?" "Because Earth is the only planet with people, with families, with us." Her words landed heavier than she knew. Riverton wasn't just about a job. It was about choosing Earth, choosing her, choosing us. Saturday came, and we spent it in the park. We rented bicycles, wobbling along the path until Sophie's laughter echoed through the trees. We bought cotton candy, sticky sugar staining our fingers. We lay on the grass, watching clouds drift like slow ships across the sky. "This is the best day," she declared, stretching her arms wide. "It is," I agreed. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Riverton's email glowed on the screen. My cursor hovered over the reply button. I didn't click it. Not yet. But in my heart, I knew the truth. Harrington was no longer my home. Maybe it never had been. I was standing at a crossroads. Behind me, years of invisible labor, a department held together by my silence, Clara's shadow stretching long and sharp. Ahead of me, possibility, recognition, freedom. A life where Sophie didn't have to ask if I'd be home. A life where I wasn't invisible anymore. I closed the laptop gently. Soon, I would choose. and when I did, everything would change. The week began with another storm. By Monday morning, 3 different projects were behind schedule. Emails poured in from angry clients, each demanding answers. Normally, I would have had fixes ready before complaints ever reached Clara's desk, but not anymore. At 9 sharp, I arrived at my cubicle, logged in, and started my work with calm precision. Around me, the office buzzed with tension. Diane barked orders at her team, Peter shuffled nervously between calls, and Clara's door slammed shut twice before noon. It was only a matter of time before she came for me. Sure enough, just after lunch, Clara appeared at my desk, her heels stabbing the floor like daggers. Her smile was tight, brittle. "Julia," she said, voice smooth as silk stretched too thin. "I need you to oversee the next Valentino update. It's too critical to leave to chance." I looked up slowly. "That belongs to accounts." Her smile didn't falter. "Yes, but Marcus specifically asked for your involvement." I tilted my head. "Then Marcus should tell me that himself." A flicker of irritation crossed her face, but she recovered quickly. "Consider this me speaking on his behalf." I met her gaze, steady. "I'll need to hear it directly." For a heartbeat, her smile froze. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You're walking a dangerous line, Julia. Don't mistake temporary visibility for permanence." I didn't flinch, and don't mistake silence for weakness. Her eyes flashed before she turned sharply and walked away. By late afternoon, Marcus did call me into his office. He asked about my workload, about Valentino, about the system's documentation. Nothing unusual, nothing confirming Clara's story, which meant she had lied. I left his office with my jaw set, knowing this wasn't the end. Clara was desperate, and desperation made people reckless. That evening at home, Sophie tugged me into the kitchen. "Can we try making cupcakes this time?" she asked, flour dusting her fingers before we'd even started. I laughed, shaking my head. "You're going to turn this kitchen into a bakery." "Better than an office," she replied brightly. Her words pierced me. She didn't know how sharp they were, how close to the truth. I looked at her, small and determined, and thought, this is what I'm fighting for. The next day, the trap was sprung. At 10:00 a.m., Clara called an emergency meeting. The Valentino project had hit another snag, one serious enough to threaten the contract. "This is unacceptable," Clara snapped, pacing at the head of the table. "We cannot risk losing Valentino." Then, with a dramatic pause, she turned to me. "Julia, as you know, you were overseeing this update." The room went still. Every head swiveled toward me. I blinked once slowly. "No," I said calmly. "I was not." "Yes, you were," Clara insisted, her voice rising. "I delegated it to you yesterday." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. "Without Marcus's confirmation, without written notice, that would be unusual, don't you think?" Her face tightened. "You're saying I lied." "I'm saying," I replied evenly, "that if I were overseeing this update, there would be documentation. There is none." A murmur rippled through the room. Peter looked down at his notes, frowning. Diane shifted uncomfortably. Marcus, seated at the far end, raised a hand. "Enough, Clara, if Julia wasn't officially assigned, then she isn't responsible. Let's focus on fixing the problem instead of pointing fingers." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded stiffly. The meeting moved on, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen it. Clara had tried to frame me, and she had failed. Afterward, Marcus called me aside. His voice was low, his expression unreadable. "She's losing her grip," he said simply. I met his eyes. "And you're watching to see who takes her place." He didn't confirm, he didn't deny. That night, Sophie and I sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker. She leaned against my arm, warm and small, and whispered, "Promise you won't disappear again." I wrapped my arm around her. "I promise." But inside, I knew keeping that promise meant making a choice soon. A choice that would burn bridges. And Clara wasn't done with me yet. By Thursday, the office felt like a battlefield. The tension was no longer hidden. It pulsed through every hallway, hummed in every whispered conversation. People weren't just nervous. They were waiting for something to break. And Clara, I realized, was determined to break me first. At 9:30, an email landed in my inbox. Subject line, "Urgent Valentino escalation." Sent from Clara, I opened it. Attached was a spreadsheet riddled with errors, deadlines missed, deliverables incomplete. At the bottom, in bold red letters, she had typed, "Per Julia Wood's oversight." My jaw tightened. She hadn't just tried to corner me in a meeting this time. She had created a paper trail. By noon, Marcus called another emergency session. We gathered in the conference room, the air heavy with unspoken dread. Clara stood at the front, the spreadsheet projected on the screen behind her. "As you can see," she said smoothly, "this oversight has cost us valuable time." Julia was responsible for this update, and the failures are evident. The words landed like stones in water, rippling across the room. Eyes turned to me, hesitant, doubtful. For the first time in weeks, I felt the old weight pressing on my chest. The familiar role of scapegoat, the silent fixer expected to swallow blame, but I wasn't that woman anymore. I stood, calm and steady. If I had overseen this update, there would be records, emails, notes, documentation. Show me one message, just one, where I acknowledged responsibility for this timeline. Clara's smile didn't falter, but her knuckles whitened around the edge of the podium. Julia, we all know you handle these tasks informally. Not anymore, I said, my voice cutting through the room. Every task I touch is documented. Check the system. You'll find nothing. A murmur rippled through the team. Diane shifted in her chair, uncomfortable. Peter whispered something to the analyst beside him. Then Marcus spoke. His tone was quiet but commanding. We'll verify. Within minutes, it had pulled the logs. Every assignment, every note, every signature. The timeline Clara had blamed on me had never once carried my name. Instead, the logs showed something else. Edits made from Clara's account. Adjustments she had entered herself, disguised to look like someone else's work. The room went silent. Marcus's gaze moved from the screen to Clara. Do you care to explain? For the first time since I had known her, Clara faltered. Her voice stumbled. That's a system error, it must be. But no one believed her. Not anymore. The Queen had stumbled, and everyone had seen it. Marcus ended the meeting swiftly, dismissing the team with a wave of his hand. As the room emptied, Clara stood frozen, her mask shattered. I turned to leave, but Marcus stopped me. Stay. The door closed. Silence filled the space. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with sharp, unreadable eyes. You understand what just happened, he said. Yes, I replied. She tried to bury me and buried herself instead. A faint smile ghosted across his lips. And now the department sees who you are, they won't forget it. I exhaled slowly. I never wanted to be seen this way. Doesn't matter, he said. Visibility isn't a choice anymore, it's a fact, and facts are power. His words lingered as I left the conference room. That night at home, Sophie crawled into my lap on the couch, her hair smelling of shampoo and sugar cookies. You're smiling, she said softly, surprised. Am I asked. She nodded, grinning. It looks good on you. I kissed the top of her head, holding her close. For her, I would keep smiling. For her, I would keep fighting. But inside, I knew the truth. Harrington was collapsing under the weight of its own lies, and Clara had dragged me into the center of it. I had survived the trap. She had not. And that changed everything. Friday morning arrived heavy with anticipation. The air in the office felt electric, as if everyone was waiting for an announcement they couldn't name. Clara hadn't returned since the meeting where her lie was exposed. Her glass office stood empty, blinds drawn, a hollow throne. The whispers had shifted from fear of her to speculation about me. She'll be fired. No, Marcus will protect her. Maybe Julia will take her place. I kept my head down, arriving at 9 sharp as always. But the stares followed me more openly now, curiosity edged with awe. I was no longer the ghost in the system. I was the woman who had survived Clara Harrington. At 10:00, Marcus summoned me. His office was dim again, the city glowing beyond the windows. He gestured for me to sit. His expression was calm, but there was something new in his eyes, something that looked almost like admiration. You've proven yourself these past weeks, he said. Not just as a problem solver, but as a leader. The department respects you even if they don't admit it out loud. I said nothing, waiting. He leaned forward, his voice low. Clara's position is untenable. She'll be gone within the month. When she is, I'll need someone to step into her shoes. Someone who understands the systems. Someone the clients already trust. That someone is you. The words landed like stones dropped into a still pond. Ripples spread through me, shock, disbelief, a dangerous flicker of temptation. Me, I repeated quietly. Yes, he said. Think about it, a directorship, authority, recognition, everything you've earned finally visible. I sat frozen, my mind spinning. For years, I had been invisible, and now the spotlight was being handed to me. But then Sophie's voice echoed in my head, promise you won't disappear again. I left Marcus's office with my heart pounding. That afternoon, Riverton's recruiter called. Not an email this time, a direct voice, smooth and certain. Julia, we've reviewed your background. We'd like to formally offer you the role of Senior Operations Director. Higher pay than Harrington, flexible hours, full support for relocation if needed. We believe you're exactly what we need. My throat tightened. It wasn't just an offer, it was an escape hatch. A door opening into a life where Clara's shadow didn't exist, where Marcus's calculations didn't trap me, where I could breathe freely. Take your time, the the recruiter said. "But not too much. We know your value and we want you on our side." When I hung up, I sat staring at the phone. 2 offers, 2 futures. Harrington promised power, recognition, authority within the same walls that had once buried me. Riverton promised freedom, fresh air, a clean slate. That evening, I picked Sophie up from school. She skipped beside me, her violin case bouncing against her side. "Mom," she said suddenly, "if you could live anywhere, where would it be?" I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "Like, if you didn't have to go to the office every day, if we could just choose." Her words lingered all the way home. After dinner, she practiced her recital piece while I sat at the table, laptop open, 2 emails glowing like crossroads. One from Marcus, "Think carefully, I'll expect your decision soon." One from Riverton, "We're excited to welcome you aboard." 2 futures, 2 versions of me. And the realization that maybe, just maybe, I didn't want either. The night of Sophie's recital arrived crisp and clear. For once, I wasn't rushing from the office, heels clicking across pavement, heart pounding with guilt. I was already there, seated in the front row, my daughter's name printed neatly in the program clutched between my fingers. When she stepped onto the stage, small in her black dress with her violin tucked beneath her chin, my throat tightened. The bow trembled at first, but then the music poured out, sweet, shaky, beautiful. I didn't see the auditorium. I saw only her. Every late night, every missed dinner, every unanswered question, "Why aren't you here, Mom?" It all weighed on me at once. But this time, I was here. When she finished, I was the first to rise, clapping until my hands ached. Her smile, wide and proud, was worth more than any promotion. Later, walking home together under the glow of streetlights, Sophie slipped her hand into mine. "Thanks for being there, Mom." "Always," I whispered, meaning it more than ever, but the crossroads waited. The next morning, Marcus called me into his office once more. He didn't waste words. "Clara's resignation is on my desk. The position is yours if you want it." A directorship, authority, recognition, everything I had once thought I wanted. And yet, when he spoke, all I could think of was Sophie's bow trembling on stage, the way her eyes had searched for mine in the crowd. I thanked him, promised to consider, and left. An hour later, Riverton's recruiter called again. "Julia, we need an answer. You're exactly the kind of leader we've been searching for. Don't let this chance slip." 2 voices, 2 paths. That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at both offers. My laptop glowed in the dim light. The cursor blinked in the reply window like a heartbeat. Harrington, Riverton, power, freedom, and then it hit me. Neither was truly mine. At Harrington, I would always be Marcus's soldier, filling Clara's shoes in the same broken system that had crushed me once before. At Riverton, I would trade one machine for another, a shinier cage but a cage nonetheless. I closed the laptop. What if there was another way? The thought terrified me, but it also thrilled me. I opened a blank notebook, the same kind Sophie sometimes used for doodles. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Independent consulting." Beneath it, "Small clients, flexible hours, my own terms." The words looked fragile on paper, like a dream not yet born, but they were mine. The next morning, I met Marcus in his office. He was ready, papers already stacked on his desk. "Well," he asked. "I'm leaving," I said simply, his brow furrowed. "To Riverton?" "No," I replied. "To myself." For the first time since I had known him, Marcus was speechless. Then he leaned back, studying me with something almost like respect. "That's bold." "It's necessary," I said. I walked out before he could argue, my steps lighter with every stride. That night I told Sophie. She blinked, wide-eyed. "So you'll be your own boss?" "Yes," I said, smiling, "which means I can choose when to work and when to be with you." She threw her arms around me, nearly knocking me over. "Best decision ever." And just like that, the choice was made. I hadn't chosen Harrington's crown or Riverton's cage. I had chosen something harder, scarier, but infinitely truer. My own path. The ghost was gone. Julia Wood was finally visible to the world and to herself.